"Officer, are you certain you want to do this?" Vanessa Reed's voice was calm enough to make the question sound almost ordinary, but nothing about that morning was ordinary anymore. A second earlier, the cafe had been alive with the familiar rhythm of downtown Washington, D.C., the low hiss of steamed milk, ceramic cups touching saucers, keyboards clicking beneath quiet conversations, and traffic rolling beyond the tall front windows. Now those sounds seemed impossibly distant. 3 uniformed police officers stood around Vanessa's table while nearly every customer watched in stunned silence. Officer Daniel Mercer stood closest, his expression carrying the confidence of a man who believed the badge on his chest settled every argument before it began. Beside him, Officer Travis Cole watched with an impatient half-smile, while the youngest officer, Ryan Keller, seemed increasingly uncomfortable with what was unfolding. Vanessa slowly looked from one officer to the next. She was a 47-year-old black woman dressed in a charcoal business suit beneath a simple camel-colored coat. Nothing about her appearance demanded attention. No entourage surrounded her. No security detail stood visibly nearby. There was only a leather folder beside her untouched coffee and a phone that had vibrated several times during the confrontation. Mercer had already decided those details didn't matter. In his mind, Vanessa was simply a woman who had questioned him when he expected immediate compliance, and each calm question seemed to irritate him more. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job," Mercer said. Vanessa held his gaze. "I didn't tell you how to do your job. I asked why I'm being detained." A few feet away, cafe manager Emily Carter stopped behind the counter, her hands frozen around a receipt she had been holding. She had tried twice to explain what she had witnessed, but Mercer had dismissed her before she could finish. Several customers had quietly lifted their phones. Vanessa noticed every one of them. She also noticed Mercer's body camera, Cole's nameplate, Keller's uncertain expression, and the digital clock above the counter reading 8:17 a.m. She wasn't panicking. She was remembering. Mercer mistook that composure for defiance. "Turn around," he ordered. The room seemed to tighten around those 2 words. Vanessa glanced at her phone as it vibrated again against the wooden table. Mercer ignored it. So did Cole. Keller didn't. His eyes dropped toward the glowing screen for barely a second, and something in his face changed. Vanessa rose slowly. "Officer Mercer," she said, deliberately repeating his name. "I'm asking you one final time. Are you certain?" Mercer gave a dismissive smile. Moments later, the handcuffs clicked into place around her wrists. The sound was small, almost delicate, yet it seemed louder than the espresso machine, louder than the traffic outside, louder than every whisper suddenly moving through the cafe. Mercer stepped back as though the matter were settled. Vanessa simply stood there, composed, watching him with an expression he couldn't understand. He thought she was afraid. She wasn't. He thought she was trying to intimidate him. She wasn't doing that either. What Mercer could not possibly know was that Vanessa Reed had spent her entire career studying what happened when authority stopped asking questions and started making assumptions. He also didn't know why her phone kept ringing, why Keller had suddenly gone pale, or why 2 dark government SUVs had just turned onto the street outside. Most importantly, he had no idea that the black woman standing in handcuffs before him was the newly appointed Attorney General of the United States. Vanessa had given him a warning, but Mercer had mistaken it for weakness. And in less than a few minutes, he was going to understand the difference. 18 minutes earlier, Vanessa Reed had walked through the glass door of the cafe, looking like any other professional beginning a long morning in Washington, District of Columbia. The air outside carried the cool edge of early spring, but inside, warm light spilled across small wooden tables while the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the room. Vanessa paused near the entrance, quietly taking in the ordinary scene. That was exactly what she wanted. Ordinary. For months, nearly every hour of her life had been measured in meetings, security briefings, confirmation preparations, legal memoranda, and conversations conducted behind closed doors. That morning, she had asked for something unusually simple. 20 quiet minutes before the machinery of government claimed the rest of her day. She chose a table near the window, placed her leather folder beside her, and ordered black coffee from Emily Carter, the cafe manager. "Long day ahead?" Emily asked with a friendly smile. Vanessa glanced at the folder and smiled back. You could say that. Nothing about the exchange suggested power. Vanessa preferred it that way. She had learned years earlier that titles changed how people behaved around you. Remove the title, and sometimes you discovered who they really were. At 8:03 that morning, 3 uniformed officers entered the cafe. Daniel Mercer came first, followed by Travis Cole and Ryan Keller. Mercer carried himself with practiced certainty, moving through the room as though every space automatically belonged to him. Cole followed his lead easily. Keller was quieter, offering Emily a polite nod before joining the others near the counter. Vanessa barely looked up. She opened her folder, read several lines from a document, then turned her phone face down when it vibrated. Outside, morning traffic moved steadily along the street. Inside, Mercer ordered coffee and began talking loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. Then something small happened. A man near the register reached for his wallet and accidentally knocked a ceramic cup from the counter. It struck the floor and shattered. Emily immediately stepped around the counter. "It is all right," she said. Nobody moved for a second. "There is broken glass." Vanessa instinctively shifted her chair back to give Emily room. The man apologized. The situation should have ended there. But Mercer turned at the sound, and his attention landed not on the man beside the broken cup, but on Vanessa. His eyes remained on her a second too long. Vanessa noticed. She had spent decades reading courtrooms, witnesses, attorneys, investigators, and officials who revealed more through hesitation than through words. Mercer whispered something to Cole. Cole looked toward Vanessa and gave a quiet laugh. Keller did not. Emily finished clearing the floor, and the man responsible returned to his table. Vanessa resumed reading. Then Mercer approached her. "Ma'am," he said. Vanessa looked up. "Yes, officer." Mercer glanced toward her leather folder and then at the chair beside her. "We need to ask you a few questions." Vanessa closed the document without irritation. "About what?" That simple question seemed to surprise him. "There was an incident." Vanessa glanced toward the cleaned floor. "I saw it." Mercer studied her expression. "Then you understand why I need some identification." Vanessa remained still for a moment. "Why would you need my identification?" Across the room, Keller slowly turned toward them. Cole folded his arms. Emily looked up from behind the counter, confusion spreading across her face. Mercer leaned slightly closer, his voice losing its casual tone. "Just cooperate, and this stays simple." Vanessa's eyes settled on his badge. She had heard versions of that sentence many times throughout her career. The words were ordinary. The assumption behind them was not. "Officer Mercer," she said quietly, "am I being detained?" And with that question, something changed in his face. For half a second, Daniel Mercer said nothing. The question was simple, but Vanessa Reed had asked it with the calm precision of someone who expected an answer, and that seemed to bother him more than anger ever could. "I asked for identification," Mercer finally said. Vanessa kept her hands resting beside her closed folder. "And I asked whether I am being detained." Travis Cole shifted beside Mercer and gave a faint, impatient laugh. "Why make this difficult?" he asked. Vanessa turned her eyes toward him. "Asking for the reason behind a police request is not making anything difficult." Across the cafe, Emily Carter stopped wiping the counter. She had watched the entire sequence from only 15 feet away, and confusion was turning into concern. "Officer," Emily said, stepping forward. "If this is about the broken cup, she had nothing to do with it. Mr. Palmer knocked it over by accident. I saw everything." Mercer barely looked at her. "Ma'am, let us handle this." Emily hesitated. "But there is nothing to handle." Several customers looked up from their tables. The morning atmosphere that had felt comfortable minutes earlier was gone. The espresso machine hissed behind the counter, but nobody seemed to notice. Vanessa did. She noticed everything. Mercer turned back toward her. "Identification." Vanessa studied him for a moment. "What specific incident are you investigating?" Mercer exhaled through his nose. "You were near the disturbance." "So were approximately 20 other people." Cole's expression hardened. "There it is." "There is what?" Vanessa asked. "The attitude." The words settled heavily between them. Vanessa's face did not change, but Ryan Keller looked toward Cole with visible discomfort. He had been quiet from the beginning, and now his eyes moved from Vanessa to Emily, then toward the man who had actually dropped the cup. Mr. Palmer had begun rising from his chair. "Officers, she is right," he said. "That was me. I bumped the cup with my elbow." Mercer raised one hand without turning around. "Sir, stay where you are." Mr. Palmer slowly sat again. Vanessa watched the exchange and understood something important. This was no longer about discovering what had happened. The answer had already been offered twice. Mercer simply did not like where the answer led. Her phone vibrated against the table. Once. Then again. Mercer glanced at it. Do not touch that. Vanessa looked at him. I was not going to. Cole moved a step closer. Maybe we should find out why she is so nervous. Vanessa almost smiled at the absurdity of the statement. Her breathing had not changed. Her voice had never risen. Yet somehow, in Cole's version of the moment, her calmness itself had become suspicious. Imagine sitting quietly over morning coffee while strangers decide that every measured word proves something about you. Speak loudly, and you are aggressive. Speak calmly, and you are hiding something. Ask a question, and suddenly the question becomes the offense. Vanessa had seen that pattern before in complaints, testimony, investigations, and court records. She simply never expected to watch it assemble itself around her own table before breakfast. Officer Mercer, she said, your witness has identified what happened. The manager confirmed it. What exactly are you asking me to explain? Mercer stared at her, and the silence lasted just long enough for everyone nearby to feel it. Then he said, stand up. Keller immediately looked at him. Mercer, maybe we should verify what Emily said first. Cole turned sharply toward the younger officer. Mercer did not even glance away from Vanessa. I said stand up. Vanessa slowly closed the leather folder completely. Her phone vibrated for a third time. This time Keller caught a glimpse of the illuminated screen before it went dark. He could not read everything, but he saw enough to make him look twice. Vanessa rose from her chair with deliberate calm. Mercer believed he had finally established control. Keller was beginning to suspect they had just lost it. Vanessa stood beside the table without reaching for her coat, her folder, or the phone that continued to glow silently against the wood. Around her, the cafe had become so quiet that the faint hum of the refrigerator behind the counter suddenly seemed loud. Daniel Mercer positioned himself directly in front of her, while Travis Cole moved to one side, creating a narrow circle that felt less like an investigation and more like a demand for submission. Ryan Keller remained several feet back. His attention was no longer fixed on Vanessa. It was fixed on Mercer. Turn around, Mercer said. Vanessa did not move immediately. Before I do anything else, I want the reason for this detention stated clearly. Mercer gave a short laugh. You really think you are running this conversation? No, Vanessa replied. I think the law is. The words changed the room. A customer near the window slowly raised his phone. Another followed. Mercer noticed them and frowned. Put the phones away. Nobody moved. Emily Carter stepped from behind the counter again. Officer Mercer, please listen to me. She did not cause the incident. Mr. Palmer already told you what happened. Mercer finally turned toward Emily. Stay out of this. Emily's face tightened. This is my cafe. I watched the entire thing. Cole shook his head as though the discussion itself had become an inconvenience. We have somebody refusing basic instructions. That is what we are dealing with now. Vanessa looked at him. I asked questions. I did not refuse to speak with you. Cole opened his mouth, but Keller spoke first. She is right about that. Mercer turned slowly. What did you say? Keller swallowed. I said she has been standing here talking to us. Emily and Mr. Palmer both confirmed the cup was an accident. For the first time, uncertainty appeared inside the circle of uniforms. It lasted only a moment. Mercer stepped closer to Vanessa, lowering his voice. Turn around. Vanessa studied his face. She could have ended the misunderstanding with a title. She could have said her name more loudly, identified her position, and watched the atmosphere transform instantly. But something stopped her. Perhaps it was Emily's ignored testimony. Perhaps it was Mr. Palmer being ordered back into his chair. Perhaps it was the ease with which Cole had converted calm questions into suspicious behavior. Vanessa understood that if respect arrived only after people learned her title, then it was not respect at all. She slowly turned. Mercer reached for his handcuffs. No struggle followed. No raised voices. Only the unmistakable metallic click as they closed around her wrists. Several customers gasped. Emily covered her mouth. Keller looked away for half a second, then back again, as though forcing himself to remember exactly what he was witnessing. Mercer stepped back with satisfaction. See? That was not difficult. Vanessa turned her head slightly. Officer Mercer, what time is it? The question caught him off guard. What? The time? Keller glanced toward the clock above the counter. 8:17. Vanessa nodded once. Thank you, Officer Keller. Mercer frowned. Why does that matter? Vanessa did not answer. Instead, she looked toward the nearest customer holding a phone, then toward the security camera mounted above the register, then at the small red light on Mercer's body camera. She was not trying to win an argument anymore. She was preserving a record. Her phone vibrated again on the table. Cole reached toward it, but Keller suddenly said, "Wait." The screen was bright enough for him to see more than before. A government contact. An urgent message. Words that made his stomach drop. At the same moment, through the cafe's front windows, two dark sport utility vehicles turned onto the block and slowed near the curb. Keller stared outside, then back at Vanessa. Mercer followed his gaze, but still did not understand. Vanessa remained perfectly composed. "Officer Mercer," she said quietly, "I gave you every opportunity to listen." This time, nobody in the cafe mistook her calmness for weakness. For the first time since approaching Vanessa's table, Daniel Mercer seemed aware that the room was watching him rather than her. He glanced toward the front windows, where the two dark sport utility vehicles had stopped near the curb, then quickly returned his attention to Vanessa, as though refusing to let anything outside interrupt the authority he believed he had established. "We are going to sort this out downtown," he said. Vanessa remained still. "Before we go anywhere, I want the basis for my detention recorded." Mercer sighed. "You have asked that already, and you have not answered it." Travis Cole stepped forward. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." Vanessa looked directly at him. "Officer Cole, your badge number, please." His expression changed. "Excuse me. Your badge number." Vanessa then turned slightly toward Keller. "And yours, Officer Keller." Keller answered immediately, speaking the number clearly. Cole stared at him. Mercer shook his head. "Enough." But Vanessa was no longer arguing. She was cataloging. 8:17 in the morning. Daniel Mercer. Travis Cole. Ryan Keller. Two civilian witnesses who had already explained the broken cup. At least 4 customers recording on their phones. A security camera above the register. 3 active body cameras. Every detail mattered. Vanessa had spent enough years inside the justice system to know that memory could be challenged, reports could conflict, and confident people could later describe the same 5 minutes in completely different ways. Evidence did not care about confidence. Emily Carter came around the counter once more. "I need to say this clearly while everyone is recording," she said, her voice trembling slightly but remaining firm. Vanessa did nothing. Mr. Palmer knocked over the cup. "I saw him do it." Mr. Palmer raised his hand from his table. "That is exactly what happened." Mercer looked around the cafe. The certainty on his face had begun to tighten into irritation. Nobody asked for a public hearing. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, they offered you facts." Her phone vibrated again. Keller looked toward the screen. This time, he could clearly make out a message preview containing the words Department of Justice Security Detail. His face lost color. "Mercer," he said quietly. Mercer ignored him. "Mercer." The urgency in Keller's voice made Cole turn. "What?" Keller pointed toward the phone without touching it. "You need to look at that." Mercer barely glanced down. "I do not care who she is calling." Vanessa finally spoke. "That is interesting." Mercer looked at her. "What is?" "You keep assuming my identity is the important question." Silence returned. Vanessa looked toward Emily, then Mr. Palmer, then the customers holding their phones. "It is not." Mercer gave a humorless laugh. "Then what is?" "What you did before knowing it." Keller stared at her. The sentence landed differently on him because he was beginning to understand. Vanessa had never demanded special treatment. She had never announced a title. She had asked the same questions any citizen might ask. "Why am I being detained? What incident are you investigating? What evidence connects me to it?" And every answer had been replaced by another command. Outside, doors opened beside the curb. Several professionally dressed men and women stepped from the vehicles. Their movements were controlled, purposeful, unmistakably official. Emily noticed them first. Then the customers near the windows turned. Cole's half-smile disappeared. Mercer looked outside again, and this time his confidence finally cracked. Keller lowered his voice. "Daniel, I think we made a serious mistake." Vanessa watched the approaching figures through the glass. "No, Officer Keller," she said softly. "The mistake happened before you knew who I was." The cafe door began to open. The cafe door opened, and Rebecca Hayes entered first. She wore a dark navy suit beneath a light overcoat, and the identification clipped near her waist immediately caught Ryan Keller's attention. Two members of a federal protective detail followed several steps behind her, while another remained near the entrance. Nobody rushed. Nobody raised a voice. They did not need to. Rebecca surveyed the room once, taking in the customers with their phones raised, Emily Carter standing near the counter, the three officers, and finally Vanessa Reed with her hands secured behind her. Rebecca stopped. The expression on her face changed so subtly that Mercer almost missed it. "Madam Attorney General," she said, "are you all right?" The words seemed to remove every sound from the room. Mercer stared at Rebecca. Cole stared at Vanessa. Keller closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, as though the final piece of a puzzle had just fallen into place. Vanessa remained composed. "I am fine, Rebecca." Mercer looked from one woman to the other. "Attorney General?" Rebecca reached inside her coat slowly and presented her federal credentials. "Rebecca Hayes, Department of Justice. I am part of Attorney General Reed's security detail." Cole took a step backward. "There has been a misunderstanding." Vanessa turned her head toward him. "Has there?" No anger. No satisfaction. Just two words, delivered quietly enough to make Cole wish he had remained silent. Mercer recovered first. "We were responding to a disturbance." She refused to cooperate. Emily immediately spoke from behind him. "That is not what happened." Mr. Palmer rose again. "I caused the disturbance. I told them that." Mercer looked around and seemed to realize that the witnesses he had dismissed minutes earlier had never gone anywhere. Neither had the cameras. Rebecca approached Vanessa, but stopped before touching the handcuffs. "Madam Attorney General, would you like these removed?" Vanessa looked at Mercer. "Officer Mercer should remove them." His face tightened. For the first time that morning, his hands seemed uncertain as he reached for the key. Vanessa waited silently until the handcuffs opened, then brought her hands forward and adjusted the sleeves of her coat. She did not demand an apology. She did not threaten anyone's career. Instead, she looked at the clock. 8:21. Keller understood immediately. She had marked the beginning and the end. For minutes that Mercer had believed belonged entirely to him. Vanessa turned toward Rebecca. "Please make sure the cafe security footage is preserved. All relevant body camera recordings as well. I want the names and contact information of every willing witness." Mercer's eyes widened. "Wait, you are turning this into an investigation?" Vanessa faced him. "No, Officer Mercer. Your decisions did that." Cole started to speak, but Keller interrupted him. "She asked why she was being detained," he said. Mercer looked sharply at him. Keller continued, his voice steadier now. "Emily told us what happened. Mr. Palmer confirmed it. I suggested we verify their statements." The silence that followed was different from the silence before. Earlier, people had been afraid to interfere. Now they were listening because someone inside the uniform had finally chosen to describe what he had seen. Mercer looked at Keller with disbelief. "You are going to do this here?" Keller glanced at the customers recording them. It already happened here. Vanessa watched him carefully. She knew that accountability often began in moments exactly like this, not with dramatic speeches, but with one person deciding that loyalty could not require dishonesty. Rebecca quietly retrieved Vanessa's phone from the table and handed it to her. The screen showed several missed calls and urgent messages. Vanessa did not check them. She looked instead at Mercer. "You seem frightened now," she said. "But my title should not be the reason." Mercer said nothing. Vanessa's voice remained calm. "You should be concerned because witnesses gave you the truth, and you decided your assumption mattered more." Outside, morning traffic continued moving through Washington as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Inside the cafe, Mercer finally understood what Keller had understood minutes earlier. The woman he had tried to control possessed enormous authority. But that was not what made the moment dangerous for him. The evidence did. Daniel Mercer had believed the revelation would be the worst moment of his morning. He was wrong. A title could shock a room, but evidence could survive long after the shock disappeared. Rebecca Hayes moved quietly toward Emily Carter and asked whether the cafe recording system had captured the area around Vanessa's table. Emily nodded immediately. "There are 2 cameras covering this side of the room and another above the register. They record continuously." Vanessa looked toward the small camera mounted near the ceiling. "Please do not delete, edit, or copy anything unnecessarily. Preserve the original recordings exactly as they are." Emily agreed. Mercer shifted his weight. "This is getting completely out of proportion." Vanessa turned toward him. "For minutes ago, You believe the situation was serious enough to place me in handcuffs. Why does preserving what happened suddenly make it disproportionate? Mercer had no immediate answer. Cole tried instead. We were making decisions based on what we knew at the time. Good, Vanessa said. Then the recordings will show exactly what you knew at the time. The sentence landed harder than any accusation. Near the window, Marcus Hill, a 58-year-old black man who had been quietly drinking coffee throughout the confrontation, lowered his phone. I recorded most of it, he said, from when the manager told them what happened. Rebecca asked whether he would be willing to provide a copy through the proper evidence process. Marcus nodded. Absolutely. Another customer raised her hand. She had recorded the moment Mr. Palmer identified himself as the person responsible for the broken cup. A third customer had captured Mercer ordering witnesses not to interfere. Piece by piece, the morning was rebuilding itself from angles Mercer could no longer control. Vanessa looked toward Keller. Officer Keller, I need you to answer one question truthfully. Before I was detained, did anyone provide information indicating that I had committed an offense? Keller glanced at Mercer, then Cole. For several seconds, nobody moved. Imagine how easy silence would have been. One sentence could protect the appearance of unity. One carefully vague answer could make the facts less uncomfortable. Keller finally shook his head. No, ma'am. Mercer stared at him. Keller continued. Mr. Palmer said he knocked over the cup. Miss Carter confirmed it. I told Officer Mercer we should verify their statements before taking further action. Cole's face tightened. Ryan, be careful. Keller looked at him. I am being careful. Vanessa said nothing. She did not need to. The truth was finally speaking without her help. Rebecca stepped aside and made a quiet call requesting the appropriate independent review procedures. Mercer heard enough to understand that this was no longer a disagreement he could explain away inside the cafe. Madam Attorney General, he said, his tone suddenly formal. If I had known who you were, this would never have happened. Vanessa's expression changed for the first time. Not anger. Disappointment. That is exactly the problem. Mercer blinked. Vanessa gestured gently toward Emily, Marcus, Mr. Palmer, and the customers surrounding them. None of them knew who I was either. They still listened. They still looked at the facts. Mercer lowered his eyes. Vanessa continued. You think the mistake was failing to recognize me. It was not. The mistake was deciding what kind of person I was before you knew anything about me. Outside, Washington continued its morning rush. Inside, the balance of power had shifted without threats, without revenge, and without a single raised voice. Mercer had feared Vanessa's title. He was beginning to understand that her title was not what could hold him accountable. The witnesses could. The body cameras could. The cafe recordings could. Keller's testimony could. Vanessa looked toward Rebecca. Preserve everything. Then she turned back to Mercer. Because what happens next should depend on what you did, officer, not on who I am. By noon, the cafe had returned to serving coffee, but the 4 minutes recorded that morning had already begun a much longer journey. Vanessa Reed refused to personally direct what happened to Daniel Mercer, Travis Cole, or Ryan Keller. Her reason was simple. Justice could not become credible by replacing one misuse of authority with another. She requested an independent review, preserved every available recording, and removed herself from decisions involving discipline. Do not investigate Officer Mercer because I am the Attorney General, she told Rebecca Hayes later that morning. Investigate what happened because he believed I was someone whose questions did not matter. That distinction became the foundation of everything that followed. Investigators compared the cafe security footage with the officer's body camera recordings. Emily Carter repeated what she had said from the beginning. Mr. Palmer confirmed that he had caused the minor disturbance. Marcus Hill provided his recording. Other customers submitted theirs. Ryan Keller gave a complete statement and acknowledged that the witnesses had identified the facts before Vanessa was detained. The evidence aligned with uncomfortable precision. Then investigators examined Mercer's previous record. What began as a review of 4 minutes inside a Washington cafe expanded into questions about earlier encounters. Several complaints that had once appeared unrelated now carried familiar details. Citizens had described being dismissed when they asked why they were being stopped. Witnesses had reported feeling ignored. Some complaints had been closed because the available evidence had been considered insufficient. Vanessa read none of those files as an accuser seeking revenge. She read them as the head of an institution confronting a deeper question. How many people had tried to tell the truth before someone important was forced to experience the same pattern? Mercer was placed on administrative leave while the review continued. Cole faced scrutiny over his own decisions and statements. Keller remained under review as well, but his willingness to contradict his colleagues and accurately describe the encounter became important. Accountability, Vanessa believed, was not supposed to flatten every person into the same category. It was supposed to distinguish between choices. Days later, Mercer requested an opportunity to speak with her. Vanessa initially declined. Then she reconsidered, not because she owed him comfort, but because she wanted him to understand something no disciplinary document could teach. They met in a government conference room with appropriate officials present. Mercer looked different without the certainty he had carried into the cafe. "I made a terrible mistake," he said. Vanessa waited. "I should have recognized who you were." She slowly shook her head. "You still do not understand." Mercer fell silent. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "Suppose I had been a schoolteacher. Suppose I had been a nurse finishing a night shift, a grandmother meeting a friend for breakfast, or a woman between jobs with no title anyone considered impressive. Would your decisions have been acceptable then?" Mercer looked down at the table. "No." Then recognizing me was never the lesson. The room became still. Vanessa continued, "A badge does not require people to prove they deserve dignity before receiving it. Authority carries the opposite responsibility. The more power you have, the more carefully you must examine your assumptions." Mercer swallowed and nodded. For once, Vanessa saw no argument forming behind his eyes, only recognition. She did not forgive him on behalf of anyone else, and she did not promise what the investigation would decide. That was not her role. Before leaving, she offered him one final truth. "The most dangerous part of that morning was not that you detained the Attorney General. It was how comfortable you were before you knew I was the Attorney General." Mercer remained seated after she walked out. For the first time, the title that had frightened him no longer seemed like the point. The people without titles were. 3 weeks later, Vanessa Reed returned to the cafe shortly after 8 in the morning. The same warm light stretched across the wooden tables. The same espresso machine filled the room with its familiar hiss. Outside, Washington traffic moved steadily beneath a pale spring sky, and for a moment Vanessa stood near the entrance remembering how quickly an ordinary morning had once become something else. Emily Carter saw her first. Her surprised expression softened into a smile. "Good morning." Vanessa smiled back. "Good morning, Emily." There were no raised voices this time. No circle of uniforms. No customers staring in uncertainty. Vanessa ordered the same black coffee and walked toward the same table by the window. The chair was exactly where she remembered it. She placed a slim folder on the table and sat down. Inside were summaries from cases receiving renewed review after investigators examined patterns uncovered during the inquiry. Some involved Black citizens whose complaints had once been dismissed. Others involved people from different backgrounds who had described the same unsettling experience. Questions treated as defiance, assumptions accepted before facts, authority exercised without enough patience to listen. Vanessa rested one hand on the folder but did not open it immediately. She looked around the cafe instead. Marcus Hill was there again, seated several tables away. He raised his coffee cup in greeting. Vanessa returned the gesture. Emily brought over her drink and quietly said, "I kept thinking about what you said that morning." Vanessa looked up. "Which part?" Emily hesitated. "That your title should not have mattered." Vanessa nodded. It mattered to them. That was the problem. The independent review had continued without her interference. Daniel Mercer remained away from active duty while formal proceedings moved forward. Travis Cole faced his own accountability process. Ryan Keller had cooperated fully, and his testimony had helped investigators reconstruct the encounter without ambiguity. None of those outcomes felt like victory to Vanessa. Careers were not trophies. Consequences were not entertainment. If the system learned nothing, punishment alone would simply close one file and leave the deeper failure untouched. Vanessa finally opened the folder. One page contained a sentence from an older complaint. The citizen had written that nobody listened until it was too late. Vanessa read those words twice. Imagine having the truth in your own voice and still watching people decide that their assumptions deserve more authority than your experience. Imagine knowing that if you carried a different title, wore a different suit, or had someone powerful standing behind you, the same words might suddenly be heard. That was the injustice Vanessa could not forget. Rebecca Hayes entered several minutes later and approached the table. "Your car is ready whenever you are, Madam Attorney General." Vanessa closed the folder. "Give me another minute." Rebecca nodded and stepped away. Vanessa looked through the window at people hurrying along the sidewalk, each carrying a life invisible to everyone passing them. Teachers, parents, veterans, students, workers, people with impressive titles, and people whose names would never appear in a newspaper. The law was supposed to see all of them before prejudice decided their value. Vanessa finished her coffee and stood. Before leaving, she glanced once at the chair where she had been sitting when Mercer first approached her. He had believed the greatest mistake of his career was failing to recognize the Attorney General of the United States. He had been wrong. His real mistake was believing dignity belonged more readily to people whose titles frightened him. Vanessa walked toward the door as morning light filled the café behind her. Power had entered that room wearing a badge. Justice had been sitting quietly by the window all along.